My husband and I were finally going on our dream vacation, except he boarded a different flight with his girlfriend. Too bad. I booked her seat with a passport on the no-fly list and a hotel that only checks in. Patience, not guess. I had envisioned this trip for years. A flawless escape where reality blurred into a sun-drenched fantasy. The promise of tranquil mornings in an Italian villa afternoons. Meandering through cobblestone streets and evenings beneath a starlit sky. With a glass of fine wine, every detail was meticulously crafted, from the luxurious seaside resort to the hidden gems. Only locals knew it wasn't just a vacation. It was the culmination of years spent waiting, yearning for this moment, Daniel. My husband had seemed less invested in the planning. His enthusiasm was faint. His responses to my excited ramblings lucre at best. I chalked it up to his work. Corporate life had a way of dulling a person's spirit. He was always buried in meetings, constantly responding to emails, and his phone was practically an extension of his arm. He assured me it was just stress. Once we're there, I'll finally relax, he had said, kissing my forehead absent-mindedly. You'll see, I wanted to believe him. I convinced myself that his detachment wasn't about us, that maybe he just needed this getaway as much as I did. Love made you see things in softer hues, dulling the edges of discomfort, so I ignored the tiny fractures in our perfect picture, assuring myself they weren't cracks, just shadows. The airport buzzed with a familiar kind of chaos. The murmur of announcements, the hurried footsteps of travelers, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the crisp, conditioned air. I stood in line, my passport in hand, excitement bubbling beneath my skin. This was it. Our adventure was beginning. Daniel had been distant that morning, more so than usual. He checked his watch every few minutes, fidgeting with his phone, his leg bouncing in agitation. I tried to lighten the mood, nudging him playfully. Excited, I teased. His smile was there, but it didn't reach his eyes, yeah. Of course, a small flicker of unease danced in my gut. Something wasn't right, but before I could dwell on it, we were moving forward, passports handed over, tickets scanned. Italy was waiting. Then as we reached security, Daniel leaned in and kissed my cheek. A quick, distracted PE. I'll meet you at the gate. I need to take a quick call. I nodded, not thinking much of it. Work had always followed him everywhere, one last call. Then he's mine for 2 weeks, I assured myself. I made my way through security, glancing over my shoulder as I placed my bag on the conveyor belt. Daniel was already turning away, phone pressed to his ear. His expression unreadable. I found our gate, settled into a seat, and checked my phone. No messages. Daniel was still nowhere in sight. 15 minutes, then 30-something noted at me. A feeling I couldn't name yet, but it curled around my ribs, tightening with each passing moment. I called him straight to voicemail. I sent a text, boarding soon. Where are you? No response. The boarding announcement echoed overhead. The queue formed. I stood at the edge of it, scanning the crowd, my heart beating a little too fast. My fingers hovered over the screen, debating whether to call again. When my phone buzzed a message from my best friend Sophie. I don't know how to say this, but Daniel's not on your flight. For a moment, I couldn't process the words. My brain tripped over itself, trying to make sense of what I was reading. Not on my flight. What did she mean? I typed back quickly. What are you talking about? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. My breathing shallowed, my hands tightening around my phone. Then the message came. I just saw him. He's boarding a flight, but not yours, and he's not alone. My stomach twisted violently. A cold, creeping sensation spread through my limbs, numbing my fingers. This wasn't possible. He was meeting me at the gate. He had to be here somewhere. I turned, scanning the sea of faces, but I already knew Sophie wouldn't have sent this. Unless she was sure. I swallowed hard and forced myself to type, "Who is he with?" The response was immediate. "A woman, brunette, younger than you," they laughing. He has his arm around her. The world tilted slightly, the edges of my vision blurring, as if my mind refused to process the truth. I couldn't breathe. The final boarding call blared over the speakers. The line was moving. People were walking past me, handing over their tickets. Stepping onto the plane that was supposed to carry both of us to the life we'd planned. Daniel wasn't coming because Daniel had never intended to. He had played me, lied to me, and now he was leaving me behind while he flew off to paradise with someone else. I took a deep breath, forcing air into my lungs, willing myself not to crumple under the weight of realization. My fingers trembled as I gripped my ticket. I had a choice. I could board the flight escape to Italy alone, lick my wounds in solitude. I could stay and make sure Daniel learned exactly what it felt like to have his world ripped apart. My hand curled into a fist, nails digging into my palm. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to break. He going to break. If Daniel thought he could humiliate me, discard me like an afterthought, while he waltzed into the sunset with someone else, he had made a grave miscalculation because he wasn't the only one who knew how to play games, and I was about to rewrite the rules. The final moments of the lie. I turned on my heel, my mind already spinning, calculating the flight attendant called out, "Ham, final boarding." I smiled. Sweet, calm, composed, a woman with no worries, a woman whose heart hadn't just been shattered into a million pieces. "Actually," I said, sliding my boarding pass back into my purse, "I won't be flying today," and with that I walked away. Not defeated, not abandoned, but ready. Because Daniel may have gotten on a different plane, but he had no idea what was waiting for him when he landed. As I walked away from the gate, my walked away. Heartbeat felt unnaturally steady, as though my body had already accepted the betrayal before my mind had fully processed it. The chatter of travelers faded into a distant hum, the polished floors reflecting the artificial glow of the airport lights. I felt hollowed, yet something simmered beneath the surface, something cold, something sharp. The world had shifted beneath my feet, and while the old version of me might have crumbled, this version, the one standing here in the wake of deception, was different. This version of me was about to change the rules of the game. The phone in my hand was a lifeline and a weapon, and I clutched it tightly, my fingers moving almost instinctively. Sophie's messages sat on the screen like undeniable proof. But I needed more. I needed to see it with my own eyes. My legs carried me across the terminal, past rows of indifferent travelers, until I reached the large electronic display. The flight numbers flickered in bright yellow against the black screen. My flight to Italy was now marked as final boarding, but my attention was elsewhere. I scanned the list until I found it: his flight, a different airline, a different destination, gate 23. I turned without hesitation, weaving through the crowd with a focus I hadn't known. I was capable of. Each step brought me closer to the truth, my mind piecing together every moment leading up to this, replaying every red flag I had ignored: the late nights, the phone calls in hushed tones, the way he had been pulling away while pretending everything was fine. How foolish I had been to believe his excuses. The gate came into view, and so did he. Daniel stood there relaxed, one hand in his pocket, his phone in the other, and beside him, draped over his arm, like she belonged there, was her, a woman I had never seen before yet. Somehow I knew exactly who she was. She was beautiful in a predictable way: long dark hair, a sharp practiced smile, a confidence that came from knowing she had won something she was never entitled to. She leaned into him, whispering something in his ear, and he laughed. Not the polite chuckle he offered during our forked date nights, but an easy, genuine laugh, the kind that spoke of comfort, of familiarity. For a split second, I felt paralyzed. My breath hitched, my fingers twitched, but I did not falter. Instead, I let the moments sink in. Let the image of them together burn into my memory. I had my answer. There was no misinterpretation, no room for doubt. This wasn't a misunderstanding, this was betrayal. And now it was my turn to respond. I could have marched up to them, made a scene, demanded answers, but that would have been impulsive, emotional, a reaction that would satisfy nothing. No, I wanted something more, something calculated, something that would ensure that when this was over, he would be the one standing in the ruins. I stepped back, retreating into the shadows of the terminal, letting them slip past me into the jet bridge. I watched them board, his hand resting on the small of her back, guiding her forward like she'd belong there. It was almost poetic. In a twisted way, he thought he had won. that he had escaped without consequences, that he had outmaneuvered me. He had no idea that he had just walked into the first step of his downfall. I turned on my heel and walked away. My mind already calculating, strategizing, there was no place for sorrow. Now, only purpose. Daniel had built his deception with precision, hiding his intentions beneath a carefully crafted facade. But now it was my turn to construct something not a lie, but a truth so devastating, so meticulously designed, that he would regret ever thinking he could outplay me. Sophie's name flashed on my screen, and I answered without greeting. How long ago did they board my voice? Was calm, but there was a sharpness beneath it, a thread of something unbreakable just now. Are you okay? She hesitated as if afraid of what my response would be. I will be. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I need a favor. Sophie didn't ask. Why didn't question my sudden shift in tone? That's what made her my best friend. She knew me, knew when something had changed. Tell me what you need. I walked briskly through the terminal, my steps filled with a sense of purpose that felt foreign and exhilarating. I need you to find out everything you can about the woman with him. Name, social connections, anything public. And I need access to his travel details, his bookings, his reservations. There was a pause. A moment where Sophie probably debated whether or not to question me, but then she simply said, "Give me 30 minutes. I ended the call and continued walking, my thoughts already assembling the next steps. Betrayal was a game of strategy, and Daniel had played his move first. But he had made one fatal mistake. He underestimated me. Revenge wasn't about anger or impulse. It wasn't about throwing accusations or demanding apologies. It was about making sure the person who wronged you felt it, not in a single moment of regret, but in a series of well-crafted consequences that left them with no way out. Daniel had left me standing alone at an airport, discarded like an afterthought. He had walked onto that plane believing he had won, but when he landed the world, he thought he had escaped too. Would not be the paradise he imagined. I had always been the patient one in our relationship, the understanding one, the one who smoothed over every rough edge, who forgave and compromised. But that version of me was gone. Vanished the moment he boarded a different flight, the new version of me she was about to show Daniel. Exactly what happened when you underestimated the wrong woman. I sat in the back of the airport cafe, fingers tapping the edge of my coffee cup, my mind operating at a speed I had never experienced before. The betrayal had settled in not as a crushing weight, but as fuel. Every breath I took was sharp, every thought deliberate. The version of me that once softened the edges of Daniel's flaws was gone. What remained was a woman sculpting her revenge with precision. Sophie's text came through 20 cows. Minutes later, her name is Lisa Whitman, works in PR. No serious relationships before Daniel. At least nothing public. Her social media is curated, but gives away enough. Attached were screenshots. Lisa at various events. Her arm linked with people who mattered in corporate circles, flashing the same polished smile. She wasn't just some casual romance. She was someone who understood the game. That was fine. I played better. I typed back. What about Daniel's bookings? The answer came fast. Your instincts were right. They're headed to Santorini. Private resort, full itinerary. Booked under his business account. He used his points to upgrade their stay guests. Your anniversary trip paid for their romantic getaway. My pulse remained steady. I expected nothing less. I took a deep breath, rolling my shoulders back, letting the cold amusement settle in. He thought he had planned this perfectly. That was his first mistake, the second thinking I wouldn't respond. I pulled up the airline website, logged into our shared account, and began making my own adjustments. Lisa's flight itinerary. It wouldn't quite lead her to paradise. A few well-placed modifications later, and her travel plans were detoured. Danielk. Perfect week would start with confusion unraveling before his eyes. Next came the resort. I knew its policies well. I had researched every detail when I planned our supposed dream trip. A direct call to the manager confirmed what I already suspected. Our guest policies are quite strict, ma'am. If there's been a name mix-up, the original reservation hold ER will need to be present to modify the booking. A slow smile formed. That meant if Lisa showed up first alone, She'd find herself in an interesting predicament, one that Daniel wouldn't be able to fix remotely. I disconnected the call and focused on the next step. My fingers danced over my phone screen, reaching out to another contact, someone who owed me a favor when they picked up. I didn't waste time. I need a passport flagged temporarily. Nothing serious, just enough to cause inconvenience. Pause. Then a soft chuckle that can be arranged. I lean back satisfied. Lisa wouldn't be flying anywhere near Santorini. Not after she was mysteriously flagged. Fork travel irregularities. She'd be detained just long enough for Daniel to be left stranded, confused, and completely exposed. Kay, picture it now. Daniel arriving in Santorini, expecting luxury, expecting her, and said he'd be alone. His calls wouldn't go through. His frustration would mount, and then the cherry on top, the final piece of my masterpiece. Daniel's corporate world was built on perception. Image mattered. His reputation was pristine, carefully maintained. Never a wrinkle out of place. But what happened when a misunderstanding led to his vacation details being sent to the wrong inbox, perhaps forwarded to key individuals in his office? Nothing dramatic, of course, just a polite confirmation email about his recent romantic getaway with Miss Lisa Whitman. I let out a breath. Perfect. This wasn't destruction. It wasn't a public spectacle. It was something better. It was unraveling a slow, methodical collapse of everything he had built in deception. Daniel would sit in paradise alone, his world crumbling around him piece by piece. I took the last sip of my coffee and stood. My flight wasn't to Italy anymore. My next destination somewhere close enough to watch this all unfold, because the best part of a masterpiece wasn't just painting it. He was standing back and admiring the work. My flight landed smoothly, touching down just as the sun began its slow descent into the horizon. The warm Mediterranean air wrapped around me the moment I stepped out of the terminal. But it wasn't relaxation. I felt it was anticipation. Every move I had set in motion was unfolding now, and I would be close enough to witness it firsthand. Daniel's dream vacation had begun, at least that's what he thought. I settled into my boutique hotel, a far cry from the 5-star paradise he had reserved for himself and Lisa. I didn't need luxury. I needed control. And from here, I had a front row seat to the unraveling of his plans. The first disruption came faster than I expected. A notification popped up on my phone. Lisa Whitman, travel restriction. Notice issued. A smile curved my lips. It had worked. Lisa wasn't getting anywhere near Santorini while Daniel was sipping champagne. In first class, blissfully unaware, Lisa was likely pacing inside an airport office, questioning why her travel clearance had suddenly become a bureaucratic nightmare. I imagined the moment vividly, her polished composure cracking as the reality of her situation settled in. The confusion shifting to frustration, her voice rising in protest, as airport security explained again that there was nothing they could do. She simply wasn't authorized to board, the hours ticking by. Her calls going straight to voicemail. Her messages seen, but unanswered because Daniel wasn't checking his phone. Not yet. He was stepping off the plane, breathing in the salty island air, probably expecting to see Lisa waiting for him at baggage claim, dressed in something effortlessly elegant, ready to begin their romantic escape. But she wasn't there, and that was the first crack in his illusion of control. I waited. Patience was key. Revenge wasn't just about impact. It was about timing. An hour later, the messages started flooding in. Lisa, babe, call me. There's a problem with my flight, Lisa. I can't leave the airport. They won't let me board. This is insane, Lisa. Daniel, where are you, Lisa? Answer me. I could almost hear the shift in her tone from bewilderment to anger to panic. And then after another 30 minutes, Daniel's first call to her. I let out a slow breath, watching the screen of my burner phone, the one I had used to forward Daniel's itinerary to his office, ensuring that someone there would notice the rather incriminating details of his trip. Lisa's phone rang twice, then 3 times. I knew exactly what she would say when she picked up. She had no idea what was happening. She didn't understand. She just needed him to fix it. But Daniel wasn't the problem solver here. Not anymore, because while he scrambled for answers, the second wave of chaos was rolling in. His resort reservation, Daniel had booked the most exclusive suite, sprawling ocean views. Private terrace, everything meant to impress, but reservations weren't as flexible as he thought. And when Lisa, the supposed guest, failed to show up, that was a problem. I pictured him arriving at the check-in desk, smiling, handing over his credit card, expecting to be ushered into luxury. Instead, he would hear the receptionist's polite but firm voice. "I'm sorry, sir, your booking was listed under 2 guests. We cannot confirm check-in without both parties present." His irritation would flare. "What do you mean I made the reservation? My name is on it. Charge my card. This is a mistake," and they would apologize, offer their understanding, but rules were rules. The policy was clear, no exceptions. Lisa had to be there for the room to be confirmed, and Lisa wasn't coming. I sipped my coffee, watching the waves roll in from my hotel balcony, waiting for the next inevitable step. His desperate attempt to fix everything, his calls to Lisa would go unanswered. Now she was still trapped in travel limbo, her hands tied by an issue she couldn't explain. Her frustration aimed squarely at Daniel. His messages would get shorter, colder. "Daniel. Where are you, Daniel? Why is your flight delayed, Daniel? Lisa, this isn't funny." Then the panic would set in, not over Lisa. No. Daniel wasn't worried about her. He was worried about himself, about how this looked, about how this felt. He'd be standing there realizing he had no room, no backup plan, no understanding of how everything had gone wrong so quickly. And then right on cue, his office would receive the forwarded itinerary. I imagined it arriving in the inbox of his assistant first. A routine check for travel expenses. The subject line confirmation, romantic stay for 2 Century Resort. At first it would mean nothing, just another trip, another receipt to be logged until someone noticed the wrong name listed next to his, and then a slow dawning realization, and Daniel, you would start feeling it then. The unraveling, I put my phone away. The next stage of his downfall was beginning, and I was just getting started. Daniel's patience was unraveling. I could feel it even from miles away. The silence between his frantic messages and my refusal to respond was like a noose tightening around his perfectly structured reality. He had arrived at his resort expecting luxury, expecting Lisa, expecting a flawless escape. Instead, he was standing at the front desk of an establishment that refused to acknowledge his reservation. It was almost poetic. Lisa had been blocked from boarding, and the last time she had tried reaching him, she was still stuck in an airport office, arguing with people who couldn't help her. Daniel, meanwhile, was alone in paradise, realizing piece by piece that things were slipping out of his control. But I wasn't finished yet. The resort staff had followed policy, denying him check-in without a second guest. His frustration must have been palpable, but rules were rules. He must have fought it at first. Tried reasoning with them, but a 5-star establishment didn't bend for inconvenienced guests. He couldn't simply throw his credit card at them and demand exceptions. That wasn't how this world worked, and Daniel, for all his confidence, had never learned how to function in a system that didn't cater to him. And so he left. I had anticipated this move. It was exactly why I had arranged a little detour for him. Sanini was beautiful, but exclusive. Hotels were booked weeks, sometimes months in advance, and without a confirmed reservation, Daniel had nowhere to go. He must have walked out of that lobby, luggage in hand, scrolling through his phone with growing desperation. That's when he would have seen the email. The message confirming a last-minute reservation had been sent from his office. Except, of course, it hadn't. It had been sent by me, a carefully crafted email, perfectly worded, seamlessly blending with his usual booking patterns. A private retreat, 5-star accommodations, discreet, exclusive, tucked away from the tourist traps. Exactly the kind of place a man in his position would choose for an unexpected change of plans. Except this hotel wasn't designed for vacationers. It was a wellness retreat, but not the kind he would have expected. I had selected it carefully. An establishment with strict entry protocols. One that catered to guests seeking an extended stay. A place designed not for travelers, but for those in need of a more structured environment. The kind of hotel where once you checked in, you didn't check out so easily. Daniel, in his desperation, must have clicked on the confirmation without questioning it. Must have thrown himself into the first taxi available, eager to salvage what remained of his dream. Vacation, he would have arrived at the facility, luggage and tow, irritated but relieved. And then the moment he walked in the doors would have shut behind him. I imagined the reception area, calm, sterile, with soothing music playing faintly in the background, a woman behind the desk, dressed in muted tones, smiling politely as he approached. "Welcome, Mr. Daniels," she would have said, effortlessly. Misreading his name, "We've been expecting you," and that's when the realization would have begun. The front desk staff would take his passport, offering reassurances as they guided him through the intake process. A slow, methodical checklist designed for long-term guests. Would he have noticed the lack of an actual concierge? The absence of travelers with suitcases like his? The way the doors behind him locked with a quiet but definitive click? His frustration would have bubbled over. "Then there's been a mistake." He would have argued, "I didn't book this. I just need a hotel for the night." "Of course, sir." The receptionist would have said in that same practiced soothing tone, "Let's just go over a few quick procedures before we finalize your stay." Then would come the confiscation of personal items, phones, wallets, luggage for safekeeping. Of course, that's when the discomfort would have settled in. The awareness that something was wrong, but by then he would have already followed them down the hall, already signed the forms, already been guided to a room designed for restoration, one that locked from the outside. Daniel had been looking for an escape, and I had given him one. I sat in my own hotel room, sipping wine, glancing at my phone, as his frantic messages came through, except now they weren't to Lisa. They were to me at first. They were confused, Daniel. "Hey, where are you? My booking got messed up then." Demanding Daniel call me now. "I think someone made a mistake with my reservation." Then borderline panicked, "Daniel, I need you to fix this. They're not letting me leave." And finally, when it must have all sunk in, the one message I had been waiting for, "Daniel, you did this?" I smiled. He had figured it out. Must have taken time first. The denial. Then the attempts to argue his way out of it. But establishments like these didn't operate on traditional logic. They followed protocols, adhered to strict guidelines. Daniel's insistence wouldn't get him anywhere. Lisa, she wasn't answering his calls. She was still dealing with her own travel ban, caught in a bureaucratic nightmare, unable to comprehend how or why her passport had suddenly flagged her as a restricted traveler. They were both trapped in separate corners of the world, unable to reach each other. I let the silence between his messages stretch on, savoring the victory. Then finally I typed my response, "Me enjoy your vacation, sweetheart. I made sure it's one you'll never forget." The chat showed him typing, then stopping, then typing again. I could picture him standing in that quiet, sterile room, the realization settling deep into his bones that he wasn't in control anymore, that the woman he had abandoned at an airport had become the one orchestrating his undoing, and that this wasn't just revenge. It was a lesson, because the thing about deception, it was never about who played the game better. It was about who saw the ending before it even began. Daniel's messages stopped coming, not because he had given up, but because he had no choice. His phone had been taken away along with his wallet, his ID, and every last shred of control he had clung to. I imagined the moment he finally realized there was no easy way out. At first he would have fought back, demanding to leave, arguing with the staff. He was a paying guest, after all. But the thing about a wellness retreat like this one was that guests weren't treated like travelers. They were treated like patients. And patients couldn't just walk out the intake process, would have been polite but firm. They would have explained to him in soft, measured tones that he had voluntarily signed up for an immersive rehabilitation program. His reservation was confirmed, his paperwork signed, his stay indefinite. Daniel would have laughed at first, a forced, humorless chuckle. "I think there's been a mistake. I just need a hotel for the night." The receptionist, ever patient, ever accommodating, would have nodded understandingly. "Of course, Mr. Daniels, many of our guests feel that way. Upon arrival, adjustment takes time." Adjustment, the word would have sent ice down his spine. That's when the reality of his new vacation would have hit him. No luxury, no private pool, no camel at dinners with Lisa. Just a clinical, monitored environment designed for people in recovery. "You must have tried again." "No, you don't understand. I'm not supposed to be here. I didn't book this place." But they had the paperwork. A detailed intake form, filled out with all his personal information, his travel history, his background, a fabricated but entirely believable profile of a high-functioning executive who had finally accepted help for his supposed struggles with impulse control and dishonesty. a man seeking rehabilitation for his compulsive behavior, one that had apparently begun interfering with his professional and personal relationships. At some point, the questions would have started a quiet man in a crisp white coat, would have sat across from him, notebook in hand, studying Daniel like a puzzle to be solved. Tell me, Mr. Daniels, when did you first realize you had difficulty maintaining trust in your relationships? Daniel would have scoffed, leaning back in his chair. I don't have a problem with trust. This is ridiculous. Denial is common at this stage. The man would have replied, jotting something down. Daniel's jaw would have tightened. There is no stage. I shouldn't be here. Call my assistant. She'll straighten this out, the doctor, because by now, that's how Daniel would be viewing him. Would have tilted his head, considering, do you often rely on others to solve your problems? And just like that, he would have walked straight into their psychological trap. Every protest, every attempt to assert control would have been neatly reframed as symptoms of his condition. Defensiveness, a sign of resistance to treatment, irritability, proof that he was struggling with underlying stressors, his refusal to acknowledge the situation. Classic avoidance behavior. He had entered a place designed to make people question themselves, and I had made sure they had every reason to question him. Back in my own hotel, I checked my phone. A new email notification had arrived, the subject line simple but satisfying. Mr. Daniels has successfully entered our program. We anticipate a productive journey ahead. I stared at the words for a long moment, letting the weight of them settle. Daniel wasn't getting out of that facility anytime soon. His nightmare had only just begun. Meanwhile, Lisa was in her own version of purgatory, stranded at an airport with no clear answers. She must have gone through every stage of frustration, calling every contact she had, pleading, bargaining, cursing. But flagged passports weren't simple bureaucratic errors. They required clearance investigations, and until it was resolved, no travel, no exceptions. I could only imagine her rage when she finally put the pieces together that this wasn't some random mistake, that someone had done this to her, that someone had done this for a reason. But Lisa wasn't my concern anymore. She had chosen to stand beside Daniel to walk hand in. And with a man who built his world on deception, now she was learning what it felt like when that world collapsed. And Daniel, he was alone in a place where his words held no power, where every argument he made was reinterpreted as evidence of his condition, where every door that locked behind him was a reminder that he had lost. I set my phone down, exhaling slowly. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about balance. Daniel had spent years thinking he could manipulate the world, bend people to his will, orchestrate his own escape routes whenever things became inconvenient. But he had never expected to be outmaneuvered, never imagined that someone could anticipate his every move, that his own arrogance would be the thing to trap him. He had boarded a flight certain that he was leaving behind his past mistakes. Instead, he had walked straight into the biggest mistake of his life. No, there was no one left to save him. Daniel had always been good at wearing masks. He could smile through deception, charm his way out of tight corners, and twist the truth just enough to make himself look like the victim. But there was one thing he never understood: how fragile an illusion could be when the right pressure was applied, and I had applied the pressure perfectly with Lisa. Grounded his luxury, escape shattered, and his supposed rehabilitation retreat holding him indefinitely. The final act of my carefully orchestrated masterpiece was set in motion, the moment that would rip apart whatever was left of the image Daniel had worked so hard to cultivate. I tapped my phone screen, opening my email drafts. Everything was prepared, waiting for the perfect moment. A well-structured, carefully worded message that contained just enough proof to ensure that the right people would take notice. The recipient list: Daniel's colleagues, his clients, his boss, the company's board member, Urs. All the people whose trust and respect he thrived on. The email was simple. Subject: urgent, confidential business trip. Exposure: body to whom it may concern. Recent discrepancies have surfaced regarding Mr. Daniel Carter's latest business trip, while the company facilitated the financial aspects of this travel. There appears to be a significant deviation from the stated purpose of his leave. Attached are records confirming an itinerary intended for a personal engagement, including luxury resort accommodations under a non-work-rated guest name. This matter may require immediate attention given the company's strict policies on professional conduct and expenditure allocation. Best regards, a concerned party. I attached the documents I had acquired and modified, not false, but amplified just enough truth to cause irreparable damage. With a deep breath, I hovered over the send button, savoring the moment before finally pressing it. It was done. Daniel had been exposed. I imagined how the events would unfold on his end. The company would receive the email, and within minutes, questions would arise. Corporate finance would be flagged, his expenses reviewed. A simple search would reveal that his business retreat was nothing more than a personal getaway, funded by the company's dime. A call would be placed. His boss would demand answers, but Daniel wouldn't be available to respond, because Daniel was still trapped in the facility I had placed him in. By the time he finally got access to a phone, his name would already be tarnished, his spotless reputation shattered. He would try to explain, try to spin the story, claim a misunderstanding, say it was a mistake. But the damage had already been done. No company wanted an employee with credibility issues. No clients wanted to associate with someone drowning in controversy, and no one, not his, not boss, not his investors, not the people who once respected him, would believe his excuses. Because now he wasn't just a cheater, he was a liability. His world had collapsed overnight, and I was sitting in my hotel room watching the Mediterranean. Waves crash against the shore, sipping coffee as I witnessed the final unraveling of Daniel Carter. This was never just about revenge. It was about justice for every lie he had told, for every moment he had made me feel small, for every betrayal he had committed. Thinking he would always get away with it, but no one escapes consequences forever. And Daniel had just learned that the hard way. The Mediterranean sun cast a golden glow over the water as I leaned back in my chair, the salty breeze ruffling my hair. The world felt different now, lighter. Freer, not because I had ruined Daniel, but because I had freed myself from the weight of his deception for the first time in years. I felt in control. My phone sat on the table beside me, silent. There were no more frantic messages, no desperate calls. Daniel had disappeared into the abyss of his own making, and the world around him had moved on without him. His colleagues had received the email his company had launched an internal investigation into his misused funds. His professional reputation had become a liability overnight. The whispers had already begun, board members questioning his judgment, his ethics, his future. Lisa, still stranded, had stopped trying to reach him altogether. Perhaps she had realized the truth. Perhaps she had finally connected the dots, understanding that she was never more than a pawn in his game, or maybe she was too busy saving herself. That was the thing about people like Lisa and Daniel. They were cut from the same cloth, built on appearances, on convenience, on self-preservation. There was no real loyalty between them, just the illusion of it, as long as it served their needs. No, neither of them had anything left to offer. The other, Daniel, was trapped, isolated, watching everything he had built crumble around him. Lisa was left picking up the pieces of a life she had gambled away, on a man who had never planned to stay. And I was exactly where I wanted to be. I took another sip of my coffee, letting the warmth settle into me, the old version of me, the woman who had given and forgiven, who had believed in promises that were never real, was gone. She had walked into an airport that day, expecting a dream vacation with the man she loved, and she had walked out of it a different person entirely, one who saw things for what they were, one who knew her worth, her power, her ability to turn the game in her favor. I didn't need to check my phone anymore. I didn't need to wait for closure because I had already written my own ending, one where Daniel was left behind in the wreckage he had created. And I walked away stronger, smarter, free.